The neighbors first noticed something strange in late September of 1867. Anna Lindstrom's tiny cabin stood at the edge of the Minnesota woods. Nothing unusual at first glance until you looked close. There was no stovepipe, no chimney, no sign of a fire ever being lit. Yet smoke never rose from her roof, and nobody could understand how a young widow planned to face a Minnesota winter without heat. People whispered that she'd freeze by Christmas. Some said she'd lose her mind before she lost her life. But Anna didn't argue with anyone. She just kept building. She was 22 years old, alone, and unwanted on the farm where she had lived since her marriage. Her husband, Eric, had died that June after being thrown by a horse. His father, Lars, told her she no longer had a place there. No children, no inheritance, no room in the new wife's heart for a daughter-in-law who reminded her of a son she didn't raise. Lars offered her $35 and a suggestion to try St. Paul. That was it. 3 years of marriage gone in a single conversation. But Anna didn't want a city. And she didn't want charity. She wanted land, something of her own, something nobody could take away again. She found it 5 miles from the Lindstrom farm, a stretch of poor soil and thick woods that no man wanted. But she didn't need good soil. She needed trees for building and a place where nobody would stare at her while she tried something nobody had ever attempted. She was going to heat her home without a fire. The idea came from the memory of cold mornings on her parents' farm when she was a girl. She remembered walking past the manure pile and seeing steam rising from the center. Her father once told her, "Decomposition makes heat enough to stay warm even when the world freezes." It was a simple farm lesson, but simple lessons save lives when winter turns deadly. So, she used her $35 carefully. She bought an axe, a handsaw, a hammer, a few nails, basic tools. Then she walked her land, choosing straight young trees, chopping them, shaping them, and raising a 12x 14-foot cabin by her own strength. She worked from dawn until stars came out. Hands blistered, back aching, but she never slowed. She didn't have time. Minnesota winter was coming. But the frame of the cabin wasn't the part that made people stare. It was the massive wall she built on the north side. The wall that looked far too thick, far too heavy, far too strange to be normal. She built a chamber behind that wall, 6 feet wide, 12 feet long, 6 foot tall. A giant wooden box pressed directly against her living space. Then she filled it with things nobody ever expected. Horse manure, cow manure, straw, hay, dead leaves, vegetable scraps. Layer after layer, wetting everything just enough so the mixture stayed warm and alive. Neighbors who saw her hauling wagon loads of manure up the trail shook their heads. A Henderson boy told his mother, "Anna's building a manure house." The story spread quickly. People laughed. Others pied her. A few said she had lost her mind after losing her husband. But the truth was far more simple. She wasn't crazy. She was desperate. And she was brilliant. Inside the living space, the wall facing the compost wasn't made of logs. It was built from dry stack stones that Anna carried from the woods. 2 tons of them. Flat stones, round stones, heavy stones she could barely lift. She stacked them with patience, building a thick stone barrier that touched the compost on one side and her living space on the other. Stone held heat. Stone released heat slowly. That was the key. By early October, the chamber was full. Nearly 6 tons of mixed organic matter. And within days, Anna felt the change. The stones began to warm. First a little, then more, then so much that she could not keep her hand on the upper stones for more than a few seconds. Heat was rising inside the wall, not from fire, not from coal, from life. By late October, neighbors rode past her property and frowned. Her cabin still had no chimney, no smoke. But Anna walked in and out with her sleeves rolled up, cheeks warm, no shiver in her bones. More than once, a visitor stepped inside and froze in place. "Anna, why is it warm in here?" they would ask. She would touch the stone wall with her palm and say, "The wall makes the heat." "But how?" They'd insist. "It's compost," she said simply. "The same heat that makes manure piles steam in winter. I just built a house around it." Every woman in the valley left shaking her head. They whispered that she'd never survive December. They said the first real freeze would kill her. They predicted she'd beg for shelter before Christmas, but Anna smiled quietly. Winter was coming, and she wanted to see if her idea would keep her alive or prove everyone right. Then the cold arrived early. The night temperatures dropped. Frost covered the windows. The wind cut through the trees like knives. The Hendersons burned wood day and night. Already worried, their supply wouldn't last. But Anna's cabin stayed warm. No fire burning, no stove glowing, just a young widow sitting beside a stone wall that breathed steady heat into the room while the world outside froze harder each day. And no one understood how her strange little cabin could do the one thing every other house in the valley was struggling with: stay warm. The first true test of Anna's strange heating system came in November. The nights dropped to zero, the kind of cold that normally chased people to their stoves before sunset, but Anna's cabin did not cool. The stone wall gave off a steady warmth, gentle but constant, like someone had hidden a small sun inside it. She slept under 2 blankets instead of 5. She woke without shivering. And every morning, steam curled from the manure pile outside every other farm except hers. Her pile didn't sit outside. It worked inside. But the neighbors weren't impressed. They were angry. Madness, Martha Henderson muttered as she visited in late November with a group of women. A girl playing engineer. They entered Anna's cabin expecting to see her wrapped in coats, begging for help. Instead, they stepped inside and stopped mid-step. The cabin felt warm. Not hot, just comfortable. The kind of warm that let you breathe easy. Martha reached out and touched the stone wall. She jerked her hand back. "It's warm." "Why is it warm?" Anna answered just as simply as she always did. "It's the compost. It makes heat." Martha stared at her with worry and disbelief. "You're heating your house with manure. A wall of manure. This isn't safe. You could suffocate. You could freeze. You could both freeze and suffocate." Anna thanked her politely, but nothing she said changed Martha's mind. As the women left, one of them whispered, "She won't make it through the first real storm." Another replied, "We'll find her frozen by the end of December." Anna heard every word and she went back to her work anyway. By late November, she had learned to maintain her strange heating system like a farmer tends a good horse. Every 2 weeks, she added new manure and straw through the chamber's exterior door. She checked the moisture with her hand. She tested heat levels by pushing a metal rod deep into the pile, waiting, then pulling it out and touching it. Warmer toward the center, cooler at the bottom. Perfect. The stone wall inside her cabin glowed with a soft warmth that felt alive. She knew the system was working exactly as her father had once described: steady, controlled, and powerful. Then December arrived, bringing the kind of cold Minnesota was famous for. Outside temperatures hit -10. Farms burned wood around the clock. The Hendersons went through half a winter supply in just 2 weeks. And yet their house stayed at 50 degrees, barely enough to keep frost off the windows. But Anna's cabin stayed steady at 55. 55 degrees with no fire. People noticed, people talked, and for the first time, the mockery turned into confusion. How could a house with no chimney stay warmer than every house with one? Anna didn't boast, didn't explain unless asked, didn't try to prove anything. She simply lived. Then came the storm that changed everything. January 9, 1868, before sunrise, wind screamed across Minnesota like a living thing. Snow hit the ground sideways. Temperatures fell so fast that men chopping wood saw frost form on their sleeves between swings. By noon, the blizzard was a wall of white fury. Wind at 70 m an hour, snow so thick you couldn't see your own barn door. The kind of storm old settlers feared because it didn't just freeze people outside, it froze people inside their own homes. Anna sat in her cabin as the storm pummeled the walls. The logs shook. Snow slammed against the roof. But inside, her little room held steady at 54 degrees. Her compost wall didn't care about the wind. It didn't care about -30. It didn't care about snow. It only cared about oxygen, moisture, and the constant slow burn of decomposition, and those things hadn't changed, but the Henderson house was failing. By evening, they had burned through every log they could reach without risking death outside. Their indoor temperature fell to 48. Martha's lips began turning blue. Their children shivered under blankets. Their elderly neighbor couldn't feel his fingers. At midnight, their fire was roaring, but the house stayed cold. That was when Robert Henderson made a decision that shocked even him. He would walk through the blizzard to Anna's cabin. A mile in -35 wind. He nearly died doing it. When he reached her door, he was staggering, covered in ice, barely conscious. Anna pulled him inside, wrapped him in blankets, and watched him slowly come back to life. "My house is failing," he whispered. "Martha, the children, they're freezing. Please help us." Anna didn't hesitate. "Bring them all," she said. "Hurry." Robert stumbled back into the storm, guided by the thought of warmth and survival. He returned with Martha, their 2 grown children, and 2 elderly neighbors. 6 people clinging to one another, shaking, half frozen. When Anna opened the door, a wave of warm air met them. They stared like they had stepped into a dream. "How?" Martha gasped as she touched the warm stone wall. "How is this possible?" Robert stood near the stones, almost in tears. "There is no fire, yet this wall is warm." "Anna, what did you build?" Anna looked at them calmly. "I built something that doesn't fear the cold." For the next 5 days, while the blizzard devoured the land, 7 people lived inside Anna's tiny 2-by-8 cabin. They huddled close, shared blankets, ate simple meals, and watched the thermometer stay steady while every house around them dropped near freezing. Her strange little compost wall heated not just one woman, but 6 neighbors who once believed she was doomed to die. And when the storm finally stopped, the valley would never look at her the same again. When the storm finally broke on January 14th, silence fell over the valley like a blanket. Snow drifts stood taller than horses. Barn doors were buried. Fences were swallowed. Even the Henderson house, normally proud in white, looked like a trapped animal under a mountain of snow and ice. But inside Anna's tiny cabin, the air still felt warm. 7 people rose from their shared blankets, stiff but alive. Frostbite had been avoided. Hypothermia reversed. The impossible little home with its manure wall had saved them all. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just stood there, listening to the gentle crackle of settling snow outside, and feeling the steady warmth radiating from the stones. Robert Henderson stepped close to the wall again, palm flat against the warm stone as if it were a living creature. "Anna," he said quietly, "this wall, this idea, it shouldn't work, but it works better than anything we own." Anna answered with the same calm she'd carried since autumn. "It works because nature works. I only arranged it." They bundled up and stepped outside into the blinding white. Their breath froze in the air. Snow crunched under their boots. The world felt broken, but they were standing in it alive because of her. When they reached the Henderson house, Robert stopped in front of his own door, shoulders sinking. Inside, the thermometer near the stove read 29 degrees. Frost coated the parlor window from the inside. The kitchen was colder. Martha wrapped her shawl tighter, staring at the home she had so proudly kept for years. "We wouldn't have made it," she whispered. That truth was heavy. It rested on every heart. News spread fast. By that afternoon, neighbors trudged through deep snow to see if others had survived. They found some homes near freezing. 2 families had burned furniture, chairs, shelves, anything that would fit into a stove. 1 elderly couple had not survived the cold. But Anna's cabin, warm, lively, full of people who owed their lives to a foolish idea. The entire community began to look at her differently. 3 days later, Robert returned to Anna's property with his hat in his hands. Martha stood beside him, eyes soft instead of judgmental. Snow still covered everything, but the worst was over. "Anna," Robert began, voice rough with emotion, "I owe you an apology." He looked down, then up again with a man's honest regret. "We mocked you. We doubted you. We told folks you'd freeze by Christmas. But when our house failed, yours saved us. You built something smarter than anything we understood." Martha stepped forward, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved my family, and you did it with nothing but your own 2 hands and the knowledge we refused to take seriously." Anna didn't gloat, didn't hold bitterness, she simply nodded. "If you want to learn," she said softly, "I'll teach," and she meant it. Spring arrived with muddy boots and melting snow, revealing the damage winter had done. But it also revealed something new. Neighbors visiting Anna daily, notebooks in hand, asking questions. How thick should the wall be? What ratio of straw to manure? How often do you add new material? What kind of stones hold heat best? Anna answered every question with patience. By the next winter, 6 homes in the Minnesota Valley had compost heating chambers built into their north walls. The year after that, 12 homes. Families who once stared at her cabin with mockery now built their own thick stone walls filled with layered manure and straw, warmed by the invisible workers inside. Millions of thermophilic bacteria turning waste into life. The cost almost nothing. The heat steady and dependable. The survival rate much higher than before. Anna became known quietly, not as a widow or a burden, but as the young woman who changed how her community survived winter. At 28, she remarried a veterinarian who understood her ideas instantly and admired her mind even more than her strength. Together, they built a larger home, still warmed with compost, still using the system she designed when she had only $35 and a need to live. Years passed. Children grew. Articles spread through farming journals about biological heating, a term some credited to her. Homesteaders across Minnesota adopted the method. Then Wisconsin, then the Dakotas. Farmers wrote to her, asked for guidance, thanked her for saving lives in brutal winters. When Anna died in 1918 at the age of 73, her obituary mentioned many things. Her kindness, her intelligence, her years of work alongside her husband. But the line people remembered most read. Anna Lindstrom created one of the earliest documented compost-heated homes in the upper Midwest. A system that saved lives during the blizzard of 1868 and reshaped winter survival for frontier families. All because one young widow refused to believe that heat required fire. All because she built a wall no one else understood. All because in a valley where chimneys smoked day and night, the warmest home belonged to the woman whose cabin had none.